Mr. Jonah Coleman, thanks for joining me on the show. How are you?
Hi, Dom. I'm good.
Good, good. I think the last time you and I saw each other was at the CMA show.
I think it was AWI convention.
Oh, AWI convention. Sorry. Uh-oh. There's going to be people angry that I got the two confused.
All right.
That's okay. We'll try to make it up with good content here today. How's that?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So, Jonah, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and, because some people don't know who Mr. Jonah Coleman is and why you would be talking to a group of woodworking business owners.
Sure. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Architectural Arts in Des Moines, Iowa. It's kind of a made-up title to sound cool, but it does the trick. My background involves engineering, project management, management level integration and acquisition of millwork companies. I've worked in millwork shops. I started in a shop that was about a 10, 15 man shop person maybe.
Yeah.
And I've worked all the way up through, we had 350 at one point as part of a big conglomerate.
Massive. Yeah, you've seen the rise and fall of construction shops as well, haven't you?
Yep, I've been a part of some private equity deals that weren't good for the companies involved, and so I've seen a lot of stuff. And I'm kind of known as an expert in cabinet vision and engineering in general. I have worked with microvellum, haven't done much with like WoodCAD CAM. I worked for Wilkie Sanderson, which is the owner of the ERP Energy. And I worked in the software development side of that as well as the engineering specialist. And I wrote my own ERP. I've got a couple of articles about that process and the reasoning behind it. So I've got a pretty good, beginning to end understanding of the business.
Well, that's why I asked you to be on the show, because you're here to talk about the software stack with me. What's the software that we need? And in the pre-interview, when you and I got together and talked about the topic, I really like the way you split things out, because when I said, hey, let's talk about the software stack, you said, well, Dom, hold on a second. Do you mean on the production side or on the office side? And I answered very wisely, yeah, that's what I meant. And then I further asked if we could focus today's conversation on what does a 5-man shop look like and what does a 15-man shop look like? And allow me to place a general apology. I mean person. When I say man, I mean labor, full-time labor there. But what does a 5-man shop look like software-wise? And for those of you who are 5, 6, 7, 8-man shops and want to be 15-man shops, what does that need to look like? For those of you who are already at 15, what's a good audit to say, yeah, we've got the systems in place for growth that are stable so we can grow to whatever we need to next. So, Jonah, I'm hoping you can walk us through that.
Sure. So we kind of discussed that there's a progression in shops as they grow. And so you start out as a very small shop, and the software that you need there is typically production-based, right? It's cut listing or generating machine code, generating shop drawings, that kind of a thing. You never stop needing that, but you begin to need other software as well. Because when you're, a 5-person shop, the business end, the front end of the business, you can keep that all in your head. Right? It's complicated, but it's not so complicated that one person can't understand it and know the things that need to be known. And as you grow, you naturally hit this plateau. And I said usually about $1.5 million to $2 million in revenue, because I tend to think that way. Shops hit this point where you can't do that anymore. And everything you used to do breaks and nothing works anymore. And you stop making money, for one thing. And so you see shops just stuck there for a while and they can never get past it. That's the point at which generally they need to start adding some production tracking type software. Where's this part? What cabinet do we have all the parts for? Barcoding, shipping especially. Because again, no one person can remember everything that there is to be known. And as you keep growing from there, you hit this $4 million threshold and you plateau again. You see, the average AWI shop is somewhere between, I think, $4 and $5 million last I knew. And they just get stuck there. And that's a very low profit plateau as well, because again, everything has broken. And you start to need software to help you manage the front end of the business, because it has grown out of place. And it's a different kind of software. And I think usually the kind of people who have grown their business to that have not paid attention to that. And
Well,
they don't even know what they need.
yeah, it's, and you've probably seen this as well, is that when we're in this industry, we think the money's in the sawdust. We're production minded, we're production focused, we've got production staff. The people that got us to 1.5 million are the same people that we started with or would have hired when we were zero.
Yep.
They're using the same skill sets and everything. And, I don't want to make it sound like I have all the answers, but I have the perspective to be able to ask the questions about, why is this not working anymore? It worked up until here. Now the feeling is we're just beating our head against the wall. We're working harder and making less. We're making more mistakes than we did before. Maybe I should shrink and go back to having 3 guys. There's less headaches. And really the answer is, it's that next level that you always hear about when you read books or you talk. What's the next level? Well, the next level might be getting it out of your head and into a computer.
Yep. And I always tell people who I work with, I've been through a lot of these transitions, and I see it at that 2, 4, 8. It's about every time you double. 16, 20 is a particularly hard one, $1 million a year per revenue. And a lot of it is just, the way you set things up is no longer appropriate for the circumstances you find yourself in.
Yeah. A client who's 60 million, and their challenge is that because they've been in business since the early 80s, there's a lot of things band-aided and cobbled together, and it's just what you call legacy systems. And changing all of the legacy systems to be able to go to the next level is a massive undertaking with even more, it's more complex than it is when you're doing $1 million trying to get to 2 million.
It's the same problems. I'll say that. I hear this from a lot of people. Oh, it's different problems. No, the same problems still exist. They just become more difficult to manage because they're kind of physically larger. There's more of them.
So let's do that. What's a healthy 5-man shop look like from a software perspective? And maybe you can break it into production versus office. But what means you're clicking on all cylinders at that? And maybe, you know what, Jonah, let me change it. If you say at the revenue, million, 2 million, 5 million doubling, let me change it from 5-man to 15 million, 5-man to 15-man, and say 1 million to 2 million to, so on. So give me those.
Sure. Yeah. And so some of it depends on the people that you have, right? Because if you happen to have someone who's really techie and on top of something, and they throw themselves at a particular area of the software stack, that can become a competitive advantage for you, even though your size might not require it. But I'll say this, we'll talk kind of like minimums that you should have. So if you're at that bottom threshold we talked about, you're in the $1 million range. You're probably running your accounting just through regular old QuickBooks, and that's probably good enough, right? It's not a pain point. You probably need to have some engineering software. Yeah. Probably, and everyone always says, well, which one? And the answer to that is twofold. Number one, it depends on what you do, right? It depends on what your little slice of our $8 billion market is. And number two, to a large extent, whatever software you have, if you have someone who's an expert at it, you'll be fine. That's the number one thing, is to find that right person to run that software. Now, in a 5-person shop, it's hard to do, right? It's hard to specialize.
Well, again, let's change it to the $1 million shop. So you've got
$1 million shop. It's still hard to specialize. I got started there, and I spent plenty of time out building cabinets as opposed to sitting in a chair.
Yeah. So we got engineering software, and just for the sake of it, and I know you don't want to name names, but I'm going to ask you to name names. What are some engineering softwares that fall into this category so people know?
Sure. Well, the big two here in the U.S. anyway are Cabinet Vision and Microvellum, right? And Cabinet Vision is what I personally use and am an expert at, but I've also used plenty of Microvellum. They're both good products. It depends on what you do.
Yeah.
Right?
You've got a Microvellum expert on staff, suddenly you're a Microvellum shop.
Yeah, absolutely. I would not try and mess with that. You need to fix the things that cause you pain.
Yeah. So that's a mix of production and front office, because front office is QuickBooks accounting, production is engineering software. Any other softwares you think we need?
At $1 million, I'm always for label and parts and that kind of thing, but it's not strictly necessary, because at that volume, most of your money is going to come from probably your marketing and trying to get the right work in the door. Does that make some sense? I mean, really good shop floor execution is a component of a profitable business at that level, but it's you're getting pennies out of it. Whereas if you get the right work in the door, you can bring in quarters. That makes sense.
Yeah. So the CRM is another thing that gets brought up as a question, regardless of the size of the company. And if you're doing $1,000 kitchens, you're doing 25 of them a year to make $1 million. Just rough math all over. Do you think you need a CRM when you're doing $1 million?
Again, it just depends on your business. So my background, I started off in shops that were both commercial and residential. Those people who do residential work, they can keep it. I don't want any part of that anymore. I'm all commercial all the way guy. And again, it depends on what you do. I mean, for us here at Architectural Arts, we don't use a lot of CRM, but we do other processes that kind of make up for it.
Okay.
So if you're residential and you're a fairly technical person, CRM could be a competitive advantage for you. It could help you narrow down, find exactly the customers you want, fire the ones you don't, or avoid them.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of work at that level for the amount of payback that you get. So I would say on average, probably not.
Well, then let's switch gears.
Very basic.
If I'm the $5 million shop, do I need a?
Yeah, you're starting to get to the point where if you're residential, you probably have some salespeople, and instead of just the one owner wearing all the hats, right? And the owner is the best person who can determine what kind of work needs to be done, because they're the ones setting exactly how everything in the company kind of goes and what the aim is and what the goal is, and they can pick the work that falls into there. And once you have some salespeople, now you need a process in place to ensure that they land at the same place you would have.
Yeah.
And so you start to get at least basic CRM, so you can have, you're not at that, when you get up into that $20 million, I mean, that's a big beast to feed every month. So you need a CRM just so you can see what your sales pipeline is and know that you have enough leads and enough work coming in the door.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you, I like CRM. I mean, obviously I come from a sales management background into business ownership. And for me, a CRM gives me that predictability. And I know that I can't grow past $1 million unless I invest in the CRM. So we're probably saying the same thing. You're just using a lighter version, for there that they do lots of residential work, but they do it through designers and general contractors. And they might say, look, I only deal with 4 or 5 of each. So I've got 8 people that refer me business all the time.
Yeah, builders.
Yeah, builders. Aside from all the risk that places on your company, because if 2 designers and 2 builders stop referring to you, you're in some serious trouble. But I want to know who's who in the zoo, who are the project managers, who's the estimator at those places. And being able to cross that over and grow the business is where that's from my perspective on the software stack. I think CRM starts to become important.
Yeah. And so, I'll compare it to my experience at Wilkie Sanderson, who's fairly well known in this industry and does a lot of webinars and sharing about their processes. And we took CRM to the max. I mean, we knew what zip codes we targeted. We knew what states we targeted because they had fewer mill workers per population. Yeah. And therefore, their general contractors are more used to dealing with out-of-state suppliers, and they don't expect you to land on site every time there's a problem, right?
Right.
We knew, but there's a lot of process involved in that, and it paid for itself. Absolutely. But I wouldn't take that exact same process and stick it on a 5-man shop.
Right. Right. Well, let's like I said, switch gears. So that's what a 5-man shop looks like. To say a 5-man shop is $1 million is wrong, because we're expecting revenue per full-time employee of $150,000. That's a rule of thumb that I use, or that you might hear a banker use for top.
It's about AWI average, yeah.
About top line sales. So really, we're actually at a 10-man shop-ish, 8 to 10-man shop range. We're confusing the listeners now. Are we talking about millions, or are we talking about people? But I think the basic message is the same. How do you grow from the size shop you are now, software-wise, mm-hmm. to the next size? So let's go to that next size now. If you've got QuickBooks, some engineering software, maybe a CRM or not, and you want to get to the mythical next level,
yep.
What's that going to take, Jonah?
So what you have going on there is you have silos. You probably have these spreadsheets all over the place that contain your business data, and none of them are connected. And you have your CRM that doesn't talk to your production, and you have your production that doesn't talk to your shipping, right? And so you have all of the information you need, but everything breaks because you don't know how to put it together.
Yeah. And
that's where an ERP starts to step in and make some sense, in that, and just to take a step back, I hate putting numbers on these things because, like I said, if you can do the things that are in the next level of shop from where you are, it's a competitive advantage, right? But sometimes you're a little too small to hire the expertise staff. And so everything's a spectrum, right? You can do a little bit of CRM as opposed to a lot, and you can do a little bit of engineering as opposed to a lot. And so finding that sweet spot just depends on who you are, what your pain points are, and where things go. But you bring that ERP on, and a lot of companies fail right there because ERPs have about a 50% failure rate for implementation.
Do they really? I didn't know that. I mean, I know they're complex.
Yeah, my background is also in software engineering, and so I'm a programmer. And you see article after article about failed ERPs, right? And a lot of that is because people hit this threshold and everything breaks, and they buy an ERP, and then they want the ERP just to do everything how they're doing it now. We're going to change every process to how we currently do it. And for one thing, you're fighting the software at that point. Fighting software is never a good idea. You see it in engineering, and you see it in accounting, and you see it in ERP. So you should always find the right software, adapt your business processes as much as possible to the software. Because, I'll just take the engineering example. How you build your toe kick is probably not a competitive advantage. Your customer probably doesn't know, and your customer probably doesn't care, right? So do whatever the software wants to do and change your process so that everything takes less effort, except for those things that are your competitive advantage. If you make some Z-shaped shelf where the front and the back are turned up and down, and your customers care about that, and they come to you because of that, and they refer to people to you because of that, then by all means do that, and whatever effort it takes. But beyond that, whether you have a half inch between the front of your shelf and the back of the door or a quarter, no one cares.
It's interesting you say that, because when I say no one cares, I think people might be offended, but you are a cabinet making software guru, and you're saying nobody cares. And I often say square is square, plumb is plumb, level is level.
Yeah.
How to cut beveled angles and data, or like, we all know those things. That's not a competitive advantage.
No.
Got to figure out what it is.
No. My old boss, Mark Sanderson, always used to say there's really four things that can contribute to competitive advantage, right? You've got machines, materials, methods, and then, sorry for this, but the alliteration kind of requires it, manpower, right? We can all buy the same machines, not a competitive advantage. So if you compete on having the most top of the line, best machinery, you're only going to have a competitive advantage for as long as it takes your competitor to order one as well. We can all buy the same materials. That's not a competitive advantage, right? So all you're left with is your methods and your manpower, so your talent level, right?
Yeah. I completely agree. If you want to buy a haunching machine, the fact that they make a haunching machine means anybody can buy it, right? It's no longer a thing. Methods and manpower. And that's where systems and processes come into place, because unless things are running smoothly the way they are now, you just simply won't be able to grow. So you've got to sort of get in place and get yourself solid. Like you said, got to have QuickBooks in place, got to have something beyond Excel, or be at an advanced level of using Excel. Be doing end of job reports so you know your profitability per job, so you can see where the gaps and the holes are. You mentioned ERP, and we're not here to promote any ERP, but so that people have an understanding when they're walking through the next trade show or see the next ad, what are some ERP offerings out there?
I worked for Energy.
Yeah.
That is a woodworking specific ERP. Yeah. Right. The company that I worked for, I was actually the engineering manager and then the operations manager at Wilkie Sanderson, where, that was a $18 million a year architectural woodworking firm that created this software. It was those people who created it. By woodworkers, for woodworkers, right?
Yeah.
Now, it's only for commercial, really. I mean, there are residential people, but it's primarily aimed at commercial. And it's also for shops that are, above a threshold. I mean, you're talking $4 million and above. Below that is just too expensive and not going to work for you because it takes too much work. Now, again, if you got somebody who's really, really techie and they get in there and put it in place for you, absolutely, competitive advantage for you. You're punching outside of your weight range, right? Always good. There's trade pack, right? Shop pack, trade pack.
Mm-hmm.
That's out there, and that's woodworking industry specific also. I would say it struggles a little bit when you get to the really complex businesses, when either in size or in type of work. Microvellum, I don't think they're producing their ERP anymore, and Roger Shaw has an offering that is can't think of the name of it. We bought a company that used this software.
Yeah.
And it's, it's not specific to the woodworking industry, but then there's a lot of them that aren't. You got Global Pack, Shop Pack, Global Shop.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, what does ERP stand for?
Enterprise Resource Planning.
That's right. So that's everything soup to nuts. Well, what does ERP mean, Jonah?
Sure. So that varies. They're not all exactly the same.
Yeah.
But some common things that are covered by ERPs would be bidding / estimating / CRM. You'll see those built in.
Yeah.
You'll see purchasing. You'll see accounts payable, accounts receivable. Some of them do payroll. Most of them do time tracking. One of the big things you need to put in place, of course, is job costing, and that's a normal part of ERP. But they'll handle shipping. They'll handle barcoding. Some of them will handle shop floor operations, production planning. One of the things that was different about the place where I worked is it heavily addressed the front office and tried to make that into a process. So, it's applying lean concepts such as one-piece flow to the office, which usually blows people away.
Yeah. I know that I've often been surprised at the way people are using time tracking, still using handwritten notes or cards instead of the one that I know, the most common, T-sheets. And it seems to be very easy to use, and it's integrated as well. Should I be putting that in place when I'm at about $1 million, or should I be waiting till I'm bigger?
Time tracking is one of the best places to start. So I always tell people, and again, I worked for an ERP company, and so I spent a lot of time talking to companies about what's the right place to start with ERP. And the answer is usually wherever you have some pain, because people hate change, and people only change when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of the change, right? Time tracking with timesheets and filling stuff out manually is painful for everyone involved. So it's an easy win.
Yeah. Yeah.
Purchasing is probably almost on equal terms.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, time tracking, everybody does it. Purchasing is just somebody in an office that you sometimes visit, it's off in the corner, or the owner's doing it or something, right?
Yes and no. So I'll take a little issue with you there in that, I've dealt with controllers and CFOs who think that the purchasing information is accounting's information, and it is not. It is the business's information. The business where everyone on the shop floor can look up and see whether they have enough materials to complete the work before they start it, or whether they can look up and see when is it expected in. That shop is going to outperform a shop that doesn't have that. Or the shop where you have to go to that corner office and find that person and ask them
for the purchasing info.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Great. So we've got the shop that's doing about $1 million has their software stack in place. The shop that's doing about $5 million now has what did we say? CRM, production software, the ERP is starting to make sense. Are there any other softwares that you think are important for a shop that's growing that quite often are overlooked?
Yeah, there are some. It just depends on what you do. If you do a lot of installation is an area that has a lot of risk relating to schedule and readiness and sequence of production, right? I mean, we've all had the experience where you have a whole lot of product made, but none of it's for the rooms that are ready. You got installers standing around.
Yeah.
So you can get into some software that helps you either schedule your installation or start to use software, even just simple stuff. It doesn't have to be software. You can get Google Sheets, and make a list of rooms and send somebody out to a job site, whatever it is. You can go all the way up to the upper end. Again, the ERP I worked for has a product where you can load your rooms and get pictures and readiness, and you can check readiness on certain dates and get reports. But you can do all of the same things just through process.
Yeah. The thing that I'm hearing from you underscores what we hear from so many people is that process and systems. Like running the business on in a consistent way is how you just get started in growth. Because if everything's random, you don't even know where to start. You're chasing cats, you're herding cats.
Yeah, and you can use software to enforce standardization, right? But one of the things that nobody expects that comes along with standardization and systems and processes is it makes finding talent easier, right? If I'm a shop that doesn't have any systems and processes in place and I hire someone to be a project manager, that person has to discover for themselves, generally through trial and error, how we work, what order we do things in, who do you talk to get this, right? Where do we get that from? Will we do this thing when they're asked by a customer? They don't know. They have to find all that out. How do we build this? How do we build that? What's the right way to order? What materials do I need to order for this project? When you have systems and processes, you take whole classes of information that they don't need to know, right? It's just in the system. And engineering is probably the strongest point for this. And I don't know anyone who says they can hire all of the engineers that they ever need. We all struggle. I mean, I tell people all the time, every rule has an exception, of course, but just assume that the rule is you're not going to be able to hire an engineer. You're going to have to make them. And when you have systems and processes, it's a lot less work. They get productive that much faster. I mean, you look at, we could take CAM software, which is computer-aided manufacturing, right? I'm just telling the CNC where I want a hole. Mm-hmm. And we could put cabinets in that. We could totally drop cabinet parts. It takes 6 months for me to teach somebody, okay, what parts go into a cabinet? All right, how deep is each one of these holes? How should we lead in? How should we lead out? Where to use an up shear? Where to use a down shear? Or you can get, Cabinet Vision, Microvellum that automate all that away. And they don't even need to know any of those things, right? At least big classes of it. They don't need to know how to lead in or out because the system decides. And you run into people who've been doing it the hard way for years, and they will show you how their way saved 7 seconds on a program. It's like, okay, great. But at the same time, we could never replace you because it would take a year to teach somebody everything you know about that. And I could hire somebody else in the same period. Plus, the business thrives on throughput, not perfect sheets. That's not what we do. And so I get 9 out in the time you get 1.
Yeah. So much for the 7 seconds.
Yeah. I mean, that's a waste.
Yeah. So again, the reason that software was invented is because it automates repetitive tasks. And those repetitive tasks, I'm repeating back what you've already said here, Jonah, those repetitive tasks that take a lot of skill and knowledge behind them. In a lot of cases, it's probably eating the business owner's time. So quite often I'll hear people say, we know we can get software, but it's so expensive. It is. It's going to cost some money, but like anything, it has to have an ROI. A CNC is expensive, but we know the ROI, and the software comes along with it. So software is expensive, but it has an ROI, or we should expect an ROI from it. It needs to earn its place on the shelf. Otherwise, why would we use it? Yeah, absolutely. And so the next step, which is in that $10 to $15 million range, the way I think of things, just using average numbers, is just more of the same of that. You need to introduce knowledge capture systems and process systems, right? So like a wiki, which the most popular one would be Wikipedia, is just an online document that anybody can edit, right? Well, so we have, if I started a new shop and I'm an engineer and I'm a good engineer and I've worked at other shops, I have no idea how they do their solid surface joint between 2 countertops, because there's a million ways and everybody thinks theirs is the one that came from God to their shop foreman to the shop floor, right? Yeah.
And I have to discover that. Or if I'm an engineer and I break off a tool because I run it at the wrong RPM and the wrong feed rate on some particular material, I've learned a lesson, but nobody else has. I always say every lesson I ever learned was by breaking something, whether it was a machine or a piece of material. And so get that into a wiki so that the next time somebody has to deal with cypress, spruce, or whatever it is, they just go look that up and they say, oh, last time we did thing X and it didn't work.
I think that's the function of YouTube a lot of times now. You can look anything up on YouTube. But it's talking though about changing storytelling, where in a small shop, you lean over to the next guy and say, hey, did you notice when I use this thing, it does this? And now 2 guys know it. One guy the other guy knows it. And you're trying to repeat that, and you can repeat it by using a scalable system, in this case, software. And then you don't lose that information to a large extent when George, who's been with you for 25 years and is about to retire, when he leaves, all that embedded knowledge in his or her head is gone. And you want to try and capture as much of that as you can, so the next person that comes along has just that much more of a chance to succeed.
And you can do, project-specific knowledge is also a thing. When you get to a certain size of a company, no one person really knows everything in a particular project because the projects are just large. You have PMs who know big chunks of it. You have engineers who know big chunks of it. And sometimes you have people on the shop floor who know big chunks of it. So you can use things like chat rooms, like Microsoft Teams or Slack, that kind of a thing. And instead of having the information present in emails that are on individual people's computers, you can put it in a chat room, and then everyone can see it. And so when a new person comes into a project, they just go to the chat room and read what happened.
Yeah, they get a history of the project. That is fantastic. So that is the software stack that we need to run and I say cabinet shop. We could be making furniture, and this is architecture millwork, all the way to production cabinetry. Doesn't matter what it is, really. You have to take these things into account. There comes a point, though, when you can take the knowledge in your head and put it into software and make it easier, faster, smarter to do it.
Absolutely. It's the only way it works at that point. When you get to a certain size, you have to decide whether you're going to get bigger and learn how to be bigger, or get smaller and make money again. But if you just stay where you are, you're not going to make any money.
Yeah, well, it has to
plateau.
Yeah, it has to be a conscious decision, because we're not in business just to sell. We're in business to be profitable. And quite often, I think we forget that. The reason that we're doing all this is to have a profitable business that returns something back to the owner more than just having a job. You just want a job. You can get a job in another shop. As we all know, everybody's hiring right now. But you want to run it profitably. You want to have, perhaps a legacy you pass on to somebody else, and it has to be built right so it can be passed on. Built right so it can sell. Built right so that the problems go away. And every problem is solvable. We're in the business of solving problems. We solve physical problems all the time. We need to fix some business problems as well.
Yeah, and so to that extent, too, people focus on the software. Cannot tell you how many times I've done consulting work for a company, come in to help them with engineering, and they have software that literally costs $25,000 a seat, sitting on a computer that they bought at Walmart for $375. And so it doesn't do very well. It's slow. Everything takes 10 times longer than it should. Your infrastructure is important. The time that you're paying that engineer to sit there is worth something. So it's important to buy the right equipment. I mean, for every one of our project managers and engineers here, they have a very nice top-of-the-line computer that has, very fast. I mean, I won't get into tech specs because I'm not sure anybody cares. But they all have 3 27-inch monitors because the productivity from that is huge.
Right.
So don't skimp on that stuff. It just comes back to bite you.
It sounds like it's being extravagant. What do they need extra monitors for? But really, you've got chat going on one, plans on another one, emails on another, and the communication flow. We all know this. Trying to do your work just off your cell phone only goes so far. Yeah. Jonah, thank you. This has been really, I think for a lot of people out there, they probably pulled over to the side of the road and they're taking notes. Like, I knew it. That's the one thing I needed to know. So I'm sure you've uncovered that for a bunch of people. But if people want to get in touch with you and find out more or pick your brain a bit, are you open to that?
Sure.
Okay. How do we get in touch with you?
So my email is jonahc, JONAHC, @architecturalarts.com. It's the best way to reach me. I get a lot of phone calls and can't always take them. So an email, I'll definitely get back to you.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, you being a techie guy, that email is the best way. And of course, your contact information, I'll put it in the show notes for this episode as well. So for people listening who might not have been able to write that down, just go back to Cabinet Maker Profit System website. And then under podcast, you'll see Jonah's episode. And in that episode, you'll have the contact information. And of course, this will be on social media as well. So I'm sure people can click the links back to you there in the most modern way. You'll be an Instagram star before you know it, Jonah.
Yeah, I don't think so somehow.
To your list of accolades.
I'll have to do that.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for joining us here. I appreciate it. And anything I can do to help you out, let me know. I'm happy to do so.
Really appreciate it, Dom.
Have a great day.
You too.